Oh, it says preparing live stream.
Mhm.
Unsupported get request. Cannot be loaded.
Oh, geez.
And that message disappeared. Taylor, is there a way for you to check if we are indeed live?
Let me see. Let me refresh the. Yes, we are, I think, live. Yeah, we're live.
Hello, everybody. So this is a presentation that includes a brief review of the basics of unemployment compensation, but with a special focus on the challenges that are experienced by hospitality and restaurant industry workers that often have fluctuating schedules, multiple employers, and so on. So many part-time workers don't even know that they are eligible for unemployment compensation. One of the things that we're trying to make sure everybody knows is that if you have reduced hours, you may be eligible for unemployment compensation to help make up for those lost wages. And we want people to have some grasp of how to navigate a system which is really not built for part-time and seasonal work. It in general is built for people who have ongoing, long-term, full-time work. So there are some ways that the UC Service Center staff can help you. So we'll be going through some of those possibilities. So I'm going to begin just by talking a little bit about our organization, the Mon Valley Unemployed Committee. We're a nonprofit organization that have helped Pennsylvania workers navigate the unemployment compensation system for many years. So this presentation is based on those years of experience, but we are not unemployment compensation attorneys or Pennsylvania unemployment compensation employees. You should be sure to use the UC contact information we provide in this presentation to contact UC staff, to find the UC handbook, and to visit the UC website. And the address is here on the screen. So before I go further, I'd like to introduce Taylor Stesney, who is a fellow staff person at Mon Valley Unemployed Committee. She has long experience of helping other restaurants and hospitality workers. And Will Arthur, who is a dedicated volunteer and member of our steering committee. He is also a union representative that helps other folks in the hospitality industry navigate their challenges, including UC. So Taylor and Will, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit further and talk about, Will, your experience as a union support person, and Taylor about your experience helping other folks?
Yeah, I can go first. So I've been in the restaurant industry since about 2012. During in March of 2020, at the start of the pandemic, restaurants had to abruptly close off all dine-in service, and that affected a lot of people, myself, in terms of our employment. We no longer had jobs, and very quickly were thrown into, can I apply for unemployment? What is unemployment? And how long is that going to take? Then, with tens of thousands of workers trying to apply all at once, the system's stressed. So then we're communicating with each other. How do we navigate this? Has anyone even talked to unemployment? So it was a lot of support navigating, all remotely, most all digitally, to figure out these issues. And now being the industry, just having a greater idea of when we still can apply for unemployment.
Okay. Yeah. As Helen said, my name is Will Arthur. I am the administrator and representative for Unite Here Local 57. We're a labor union that represents about 2,000 members in Western PA and the very northern bit of West Virginia. In the hospitality industry. Prior to working for the union, I was also a hospitality worker. I was a server and bartender at the William Penn Hotel in downtown Pittsburgh. I like Taylor, was laid off during the COVID-19 pandemic, and went through all the problems of dealing with the unemployment system at probably its worst point ever. And then since then, becoming staff person here at the union. Also assisting members since then to get their COVID or get their unemployment benefits when they're entitled to them. You're muted, Helen.
Thank you both. So we're going to go through these slides with the basic information, and then I'm going to be asking some questions of both Taylor and Will regarding those special challenges that they're very familiar with. So many folks are not really even, aware of what determines eligibility for unemployment compensation. Generally, workers are eligible if they were laid off by their employer or had their hours reduced, were terminated, but not because of intentional wrongdoing, voluntarily left work because of necessary and compelling reasons such as health, safety, or significant changes in work conditions, and are able, available, and legally authorized to work in the U.S. So there are a number of ways that you can file your claim, and we will be sharing these slides in the chat. You can refer back to the slideshow for any of this information, but you can apply online at the address here, by phone. If you're unable to reach someone by phone, you can email uchelp@pa.gov with the subject line, "Need help filing my claim," provide your phone number and request a call. When the UC Service Center calls, the number may appear to be blocked or unknown. So when you're waiting for that UC call, be sure to answer all calls. You might have to talk to some spam folks. If you don't have internet access or skills, you can schedule an in-person appointment with the UC Service Center staff through the UC Connect program by calling 855-284-8545. If you do file online, you'll need to go through the ID.me process, which is to help prevent scams and fraud. It's a digital network that helps people prove their identity. There is a self-service option, but if that doesn't work, you can finish verifying on a video call with a video chat agent. When you complete the ID.me questions, you'll then be redirected back to the UC claim form. Be sure to answer all questions to the best of your ability and double check your information before entering it. I am going to back up just a moment. Things that it's useful to have handy when you're applying is your social security number, home address, phone number, email address, your employer's name, their mailing address, the phone number, your first and last day worked, the reason for leaving or working few hours, and your gross earnings. After you finish filing, it's very important to go to the CareerLink website, which partners with the UC system, to register. Even if you have registered before, you will need to update your resume at the site, and you need to be sure that you've fully completed the process and save your confirmation where you know you can find it. The two systems, the UC system and the CareerLink system, don't talk to each other so well. And so having that documentation has saved a lot of people from losing their benefits, or it's allowed them to restore their benefits to show that they did do that. If you don't have computer access, you can sign up for the Pennsylvania teleclaims system, where you can file your weekly certifications by phone. So be sure to ask them to send a PIN in the mail, and then you can use that PIN to call in each week and answer questions regarding your ability and availability for any work, part-time earnings, and your work searches, and so on. If you are filing online, this is at the top of your unemployment compensation dashboard. There are these tiles at the top, and there is a tile there that says file certifications with a hot link at the bottom. That's where you can answer those questions to maintain your eligibility after you initially file. Now, what determines eligibility? There's two main steps. There's first financial determination. So within about a week of your initial claim application, the UC Service Center reviews and issues a determination of your eligibility, including the weekly benefit rate based on the highest quarterly wages in a base year, your total base year wages, and the number of credit weeks in which you earned 116 or more during your base year. And that's really complicated. What gets even more complicated is how they look at what is a base year. So this chart, if you apply in, let's say, the first quarter of 2025, January, February, or March, they would actually look, they would skip the quarter before that, and they would look at the 4 quarters of, it would be October, November, and December of 2023, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September of 2024. So it is indeed a very confusing system. One of the things that you should be aware of is that sometimes employers don't fully report earnings, and you can file what's called a wage protest. So, but despite all the complications, this is something that you can call the UC Service Center and ask for an explanation of how they determined your benefits. The second step of determining your eligibility is what's called a separation determination. So that takes longer. It takes 4 to 8 weeks. The UC Service Center reviews information from both you and your former employer to determine whether the cause of your separation qualifies you for benefits. We're covering today 3 main forms of separation. And this is one that's actually very common for hospitality workers, the layoff. So that's elimination of a position due to an employer's lack of work to offer, a lack of employer funds, or because of an employer reorganization. Layoffs can be temporary, seasonal, or permanent. Sometimes your employer will not call your separation a layoff, but a furlough, a position elimination, or a reduction of work hours to 0, or they might reduce your hours. So again, when you have reduced hours, you can apply for unemployment compensation to help make up those loss of wages. Another very common form of separation is a termination. That means that your employer ended your employment. But for UC benefits to be denied to someone who's terminated, the employer has to show, they have the burden of proof to show that the claimant was terminated for willful misconduct or for deliberate violation of company policies. So if you make mistakes or if you were unable to perform tasks, that's not misconduct. the employer has the right to fire you, but that does not mean that you are not, you can still be eligible for your benefits, your unemployment compensation benefits. So you can share testimony and evidence that you did your job to the best of your ability. Tardiness or absenteeism due to health or other valid reasons is usually not misconduct, especially if you can present evidence to show that you followed the employer's policies regarding timely communications with them and the documentation of reasons for absences or tardiness. Other useful things to share are company policy documents to show that the conduct, whatever you did, was not you were not violating an official policy. And it's also useful to show that you were fired abruptly. You weren't giving any warnings or training or counseling to help you do better. Many companies have a progressive discipline policy, and if you can show that they didn't follow that, that can really weigh in your favor when the UC Service Center or a referee for an appeal hearing is considering whether or not you're eligible. Finally, the other major reason for separation is resignation. And in that case, if you resign or quit a job, the burden of proof is for you to show that you had necessary and compelling reasons to quit. So that could include documented medical conditions that made it hard to continue that job, but you still need to show that you could do other types of work. You need to be able and available for work. So you can also show that there were significant changes in work conditions from the time of hire, such as your schedule, work location, responsibilities, pay, benefits, and so on. If those really changed, present that evidence, and that will help prove your eligibility. You can also show that there were unhealthy or unsafe conditions at the workplace, or you can show that your employer or supervisors were violating ethical or professional standards or legal standards. You can also show that transportation problems made it difficult to reach the workplace. So some people lose their cars. Sometimes bus route changes make it impossible to get there. Sometimes the workplace moves. And then finally, you can also show the need to care for family members or, someone that you have some sort of responsibility for, a sick relative, kids, and so on. So you also, this is very important, you have to show that you made reasonable efforts to communicate with your managers or supervisors, including going up the chain of command, to ask for changes or accommodations that would allow you to keep your job. So if there were changes in the schedule, you would need to communicate the hours that you actually needed. You would need to let them know, I've got to pick up my kids at this time, or, other conflicts that would keep you from taking those changed hours, including your basic health. But if you can show that you had notes, emails, texts, any kind of conversations in which you asked for accommodations for whatever circumstances you're facing, that will go a long way to proving that you are eligible. So the UC Service Center will be interviewing almost always both claimants and employers. They'll send fact-finding forms and review available evidence. So it's very important to respond to calls, messages on your dashboard, and any fact-finding forms that you receive. If you have chosen to have communications from UC come through email, then check your email frequently and be sure to respond very quickly. Things that you can share with the UC Service Center include a timeline of relevant events with the emphasis on relevant. It needs to be really focused on the reasons for you resigning, or the reasons that if you were terminated, it wasn't misconduct, or other communications regarding the causes of separation, documents such as company policies, memos, letters, emails, app messages, disciplinary forms, texts, pay stubs, timesheets, all of those safety checklists that the employer wasn't following. There is a wide range of types of evidence that can really help you. It's very useful to make a list of the names and positions of those that were involved in the situation, which led to the separation. And you may wish to contact firsthand witnesses that could be willing to testify to incidents and communications relevant to the separation. Even when you're just waiting for the initial determination, it's often useful to contact those people while their memories are still fresh and see if they might be willing to testify. So, special challenges for part-time and seasonal workers. Unpredictable work hours, seasonal fluctuations of work hours, abrupt temporary or permanent closures. Again, if hours are reduced, you may be eligible to help for UC to help replace that lost income. So I wanted to just ask Taylor and Will about some of the kinds of situations that they have observed from their own experience. What are some of those special challenges that you've seen? Taylor?
Yeah, so sometimes restaurants or like smaller businesses, they will just abruptly close, or even sometimes temporary close if they need a break, or things happen. I don't know, that's just the nature of the business, but they also have employees. So in those instances, and there's sometimes not a human resource person in those instances to help you navigate that as well. But you still are eligible to apply and go through the process, just because these things happen abruptly, but it's only within a small place. Small employer, big employer, you're still eligible for unemployment.
What can you ask your employer to provide? Let's say they're just not, they're not knowledgeable about UC. What might help you when you apply for UC in terms of documentation?
If you do have information on an opening date, if the restaurant didn't just shut down for business or close forever, get that information, especially if it's written down or it's on a schedule or somewhere. Get a confirmation of that, but also confirmation if there is no information to be provided. If it says indefinitely or until further notice, that still gives you what's going to be required in the next steps of the process. If you have to do a work search, find something else, or just putting in your claims.
Yeah, so if it's a little mom and pop restaurant, right? If they can write a letter saying the business closed, we had to lay off our workers, we laid off Taylor, we don't anticipate reopening, that can be a useful letter for you to upload as part of your claim. It makes it that's clear documentary evidence that it's a layoff and there was no misconduct and you didn't resign. If as you said, if the restaurant thinks that they will be able to reopen and they have a date, if they're able to provide that in a document, then that means that you would not be obligated to do work searches during that time, but it has to be in writing and it has to be a definite date. It tends to be a somewhat unusual situation. Most of the time you do have to do your work searches and you do have to document them. Um, Will, what are other challenges that you've seen yourself or that you've helped people with?
Sure. So one big thing with in the hotel industry, especially in kind of the banquet catering side of the industry, we run into is a lot of our members and a lot of people who work in that industry work for multiple employers. Sometimes people will have a main steady job where they're considered foolish time, and then others will just have a bunch of little they'll work at different places and they just kind of work when they get called because the nature of that business is that the work is not steady, unfortunately. So one thing is educating people, which at least in the unionized hotels, a lot of people are familiar with unemployment. They kind of know how the process works. But the idea that if you have even if though you don't necessarily have a single full-time job, if you were working multiple places that gave you enough credit to qualify for unemployment, as Helen explained earlier, and you have those hours reduced, which in our industry tends to be, beginning of the year, usually January, February, that business kind of dies off for a few months. What's really important, what can be, I think, a big challenge is when you have these multiple employers, it's being able, whatever you're reporting, your earnings, if you're on partial unemployment, is you can have multiple employers. So say, the first week of your claim, you work for employer A. That employer, and then you have another employer. The second week you're on unemployment, you only work for employer B. You don't work for employer A. That third week, when you go in to file for your new client, your new week, it will flag that or ask you about that first employer you worked for, if you're still working for them, if there was a separation. Now, a lot of people will think, well, no, there's not a separation. I'm just a part-time on-call employee. Some weeks I don't work, I'm still employed. But if you have no earnings, the UC considers that another separation. So you'll have to give an explanation of, well, why aren't you working there? You'll say, laid off, hours reduced. And then what can happen sometimes is the employer sometimes either doesn't respond to that second separation, so it'll just get kind of an under review status, or they might reply back and go, oh no, Jane Doe still works for us. She's not unemployed, or there's no separation, even though they didn't work that week, and they'll say still employed. And now suddenly there's a separation mismatch that needs to be investigated, that can cause delay in further payments of the claim. That's one of the big things we see with people who have multiple jobs.
Yeah, so that usually means what have you found to be most useful in that circumstance, Will?
So in my experience helping our members, and even my own mother, who's also a member of the union, the best thing when you have that show up, if you get a separation mismatch or claim under review, is as soon as you can to contact the UC Service Center. Normally, if you're able to call them, get an examiner on the line, explain your situation, in my experience, they can usually clear it right then and there. Like, it'll immediately clear the open issue on the claim and release your payment for that week and get you back on track. Of course, we know that calling UC can be a bit of a hassle sometimes. I know it's gotten better since the COVID days, but you still end up there's sometimes you still can't connect, and even if you can connect, you might be on hold for hours. We would recommend sending an email detailing what your situation is. Always include what your full name, that is as it appears on your claim, and your phone number, so that they can and request a callback on the issue, so that they can call you. And as Helen said earlier, sometimes it will show up as like a Harrisburg number. Sometimes it'll just show up as private or unknown. So you want to make sure for those few days after you send that email that you're answering every call you get, even though you might end up having to talk to some scammers. But But
Yes.
those are really the two things. Yeah.
It's very useful to assemble documents and other information that can help explain and demonstrate your situation. Such as you might have timesheets or schedules from
Mhm.
multiple employers. You could take photographs of those and upload that on your email, attach it to your email. So you can show that, yes, indeed, you're working these reduced hours for multiple employers. And then, of course, always be sure to report the earnings from all of those employers. That can also create problems if you don't get that into the system.
Yes. Yeah, and that's which I know has gotten better. I know there was some issues whenever they first rolled out the new UC system back in 2021 about people were having difficulty reporting their partial hours. But yeah, to make sure always you have to report all the earnings, and it's the earnings within the week you earn them, not when you actually get paid them.
Right.
So if
That's
you
a
work,
confusion.
yeah, the first through the seventh, and make $200, you need to that coming Sunday, you need to report those earnings. It's not, even if you're paid, you might not get paid that money for 2 weeks. It's the week in which it's earned. And I know that can also be another challenge with in our the banquets kind of industry. Is a lot of people work on a service charge basis, so sometimes you don't know the exact amount of money you earned. You might have to like track down a manager or something to say like, hey, what am I actually getting paid for this event? Because it's people are variable income.
Thank you. Another challenge that people face is misclassification. Um, there, this is happening more and more in restaurant industries. So this is an article about an Uber for restaurant hiring. So people are being kind of plugged in here and there at different employers and being called independent contractors when they are in fact employees. So the main thing that you need to show the unemployment compensation system is you did not establish the business that you're working at. You're, and secondly, that the employer has significant control over your work. That could be your schedule, the way you do your work, how you're directed to do it, the location that you do it. The app, it's like if you're working with an app that can show you, that basically directs you as to how you perform your services, in which order. So if you can basically present information to show that even if you signed a contract that says you're an independent contractor, that does not make you an independent contractor under the law. And if you can show that you don't own the app or the business, and you have to follow directions, you should be eligible. Sometimes you're going to have to go through an appeal hearing to prove that. But I think what we would really like to encourage you is don't give up, because the costs and the consequences of misclassification can be pretty heavy. So when you're misclassified as an independent contractor, you lose eligibility for unemployment compensation. You have to pay the full cost of Social Security and Medicare taxes. You lose qualification for health insurance and workers' compensation if you're hurt on the job. You might not be paid minimum wage and overtime pay. Now, that's something that's very common in the hospitality industry as in general. You do lose the protections of the National Labor Relations Act, which ensures workers' rights to form unions and bargain collectively. And you might lose important training, support, and oversight that you need to perform your work to basic standards. So that can not only be costly or dangerous for you, but also for the public. So we've gone over this. This is how you can share your circumstances with the UC Service Center. If you can upload documents to your dashboard, it often makes sense to also email them to the UC Service Center using this email. There are times, because of various glitches within the UC website, that sometimes even the staff of the UC Service Center cannot see documents that have been uploaded. So we're working with the department to try to fix, get this fixed. There's this giant contractor that manages their website. But to be safe, I would just encourage anybody who's applying to also send documents through your email. So again, here are the things that you can do to show that you are not an independent contractor. So not only the UC Climb application, but also verbal interviews and fact-finding forms that you receive after filing your claim. And again, if you have a temporary layoff with a return to work date, make sure to provide that documentation. Okay, so anything that either of you would like to add to this information, Taylor or Will? Is that
I was gonna pass to Will, but
Yeah.
or
Oh, go ahead.
Go
Yeah,
for it.
I can say, so yeah, with, let me get that back up. Yeah, to add, like, the temporary layoffs, without the, return to work. That is one thing, as we said, yeah, if you do have like an actual in writing return to work date, then you want to be able to, you do want to have the actual documentation of that, because that, as Helen said, exempts you from work search. However, if you don't have an actual hard, written date, even if it's just a verbal, like, yeah, business should pick up in early March. Don't put that you have a definite return date down, one, because if you get called on it, you could possibly lose your benefits if you're not doing your work searches. And two, I know there's also been issues when if somebody has a definite says they have a definite return to work date, it will auto kind of end their claim once that date hits. And who knows, that might not actually be the case when you get to that point, because business changes, especially in this industry. It can be very variable.
Great. So this is the first in a series. We're working on another presentation and interview regarding holiday work, seasonal work. So a little bit more specific information about those types of circumstances. So we hope to do that before the end of the year, because as Will says, the first of the year, January and February, tend to be really a slow season when people really do need that unemployment compensation. So we, for that presentation, we'll have examples of the kinds of fact-finding forms that you might receive. And we can go into more specifics of the types of answers that you can provide that can help prove your eligibility. So we'll have some actual UC forms to look at for the next presentation. Are there any questions? Is there anybody out there, Taylor, that
no questions. Just a reminder from Rosalind, also in your email, you could including the last four of your social security, at least in terms of communication. Obviously, be smart about the information you share, but sometimes having that last four numbers will help in the communication process as you're going back and forth.
Yes, I'm going to share that slide again really quickly. So if you put in the subject line, need help filing my weekly certification, that your phone number, the last four digits of your social security number, and the request for the callback, that can really help. So thank you, Rosalind, for that reminder. All right. Well, if you see this on our page and if you have questions, please do comment, and we will try to get back to you to answer your questions. Thank you, Will and Taylor. Thank you, everybody who sees this presentation. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.